You know, I've had more than a few careers over my life. I was a salesman, I was an entertainer, a gambler, a neurooptometrist. I always wanted to be an entertainer. When I was 12, I read for part for a off-Broadway show called Kiss and Tell, and I got the part, and we traveled around. I spent the summer doing that. And then I got an opportunity to read for part for Life with Father, a Broadway show that at that time was the longest running Broadway show. As it happened, the bus that was bringing me in broke down. I never made it there. But they got me a reading for a movie that was being filmed by MGM. They gave me 3 scenes to read, and I had to cry in 2 of them, and I had to have a British accent, and they never filmed that picture. And if you saw the script, you'd know why. I mean, it was a real bummer, really bad. In the meantime, I had to go back to Florida to go to school, so I did not get an opportunity to read for any other parts. Well, at about age 14, I took up ventriloquism. I did some radio, I did some club dates. It made my Army career a lot better because I got to be in special services, but I wasn't really getting anywhere. And so I gave up ventriloquism, sort of. I was really destined to become an optometrist. Now, I went to school in Memphis. At that time, there wasn't any schools of optometry in Florida. So I figured Memphis should be pretty warm. I was wrong. The year I went there, they set a record. They had a snowstorm, and Memphis was the coldest city in the nation. You can look it up, 1963. We had a 14-inch snowfall, and it was 17 below zero. So when I was there in Memphis, I had to work my way through school. So I went to see one of the theatrical agents, and I said, hey, I'm a ventriloquist. I did some comedy down in Florida mostly. Can you get me any work? And so he said, well, how much time do you do? And I said, well, I can do about 20, 30 minutes, something like that, maybe 40. He says, that's no good. If you're the only act, you have to be able to do about an hour. Well, I said, I don't have an hour's worth of material for me and my dummy. He says, well, did you ever do any stand-up? And I said, well, actually, I did a little, and it would be much easier to write material for one person than it would be for 2. So I went ahead and I wrote a bunch of material, and I came back to him and I said, okay, I've got it done now. I can do some stand-up, and actually I'm going to bring my dummy out as an encore. And he says, fantastic. So he gets me my first job, and it was for a group of Baptists with their minister sitting at one end of the table. And my material wasn't cut out for Baptists. And I would tell a joke, and all the heads would turn toward the minister. And if he would laugh, then they would turn back to me and they would laugh. And that was my start getting some work there in Memphis. Well, all of a sudden, I started getting more work than I had ever gotten in my life. So evidently, I was supposed to be a stand-up comic. Well, the agent booked me into the best nightclub in Memphis. And that was a little bit difficult because I was still going through school. So I would do 2 shows a night. I would finish about 1 o'clock in the morning. I would have to get up at 5 to go to school. It was a little bit difficult. I did 2 shows a night. There were 2 different shows. I had enough material where I could do 2 entirely different shows. On the second night, I did a 3rd routine. And the second show, the 4th one, was actually a combination of the first 2. And that seemed to work out pretty well. Like I said, I would bring my dummy out as an encore. And at that time, you'd have to see him. He was the only dummy that I know of that actually stood 5 feet tall. He did not work from my lap. He stood 5 feet tall. He was on roller skates. and I could roll him right out into the audience and go to a table, and he would bend over the table and he would start talking to the people, sort of like I patterned him after Don Rickles. That was one of my favorite comics. So he was sort of a little bit of an insulting dummy, but he would talk to them and we would get back and forth, and it worked out really, really well. One time he booked me into the Thunderbird, another nightclub, which was at the bottom of a high-rise apartment building. They had a great band. I loved working there. Again, I would do my stand-up, and then I would bring the dummy out. Well, one night, I have to mention this. The owner of the Thunderbird had about 3 or 4 working girls, including his own girlfriend, and they would, if they found a client, would go upstairs. And that's where they would entertain their clients. Well, now understand, I have nothing against working girls. God knows I've contributed to their cause many times. Now, one of the things about working girls that I like is when you go out on a date, a first date with just a girl that you met online or whatever, all during dinner, you're thinking about one thing: am I going to get laid? When I'm in bed with my hooker, I'm only thinking about what am I going to have for dinner? Anyway, one night I'm doing my act, and there at the bar is the boss's girlfriend, and she's probably a little bit drunk. And she starts to heckle me. Well, I know that she's the boss's girlfriend, so I let it go. And she heckles me again, and I just sort of ignore her. Well, now I finish my bit, and I go to bring out the dummy as my encore. Now, you have to understand one thing. When I'm working with the dummy, it's like he's a different person. And he's likely to say things that I would never say. So I'm out there with the dummy, and she's heckling him now. Well, he lets it get by the first time. The next time she says something, you have to picture my dummy. He could close one eye, both eyes, raise his eyebrows. He does this very, very slow turn like this and looks at her and says, "Do I go upstairs and bother you when you're working?" I thought for sure I was going to get fired, but no. He hustled her out of there, realizing that she had a little bit too much to drink. So I really did like working as a stand-up. It gave me a lot more freedom. And back then when I was younger, it was a lot easier to establish rapport with a crowd. All I had to do was talk about sex and drugs. Now that I'm a little bit older, hey, I got to admit, I still take drugs. Lipitor, Metamucil, Viagra, a lot of Viagra. But I got to swallow it quick, otherwise I get a stiff neck. That's for erectile dysfunction. You know, that's God's way of telling you, you screwed enough. And occasionally I still perform. I do mostly mentalism now, and some stand-up. I rarely bring out the dummy, just once in a while. But my love is now optometry. I made the right decision by giving up show business, or it gave me up. I don't know which first. Anyway, I started college right after high school. Then I quit and went into the Army for the 2 years. Came back out and I started college again. I was taking business courses, and at the time I was working as a salesman, and I got to be sales manager. And the problem was I made too much money. So I dropped out of school, and I was out of school for 6 years. Now, I always had a desire to help people, but I didn't have the opportunity. Well, one time I went to have my eyes examined, and the optometrist I went to just happened to be the perfect doctor for me. And I said something after the exam that changed my life forever. Had I not said this, I would probably still be a salesman today. And what I said was, you know, I once thought about optometry as a career. And he said, what stopped you? And I said, well, I think there's too much math, and I do not like math. He says, no, very little math. In fact, we have so many new things in optometry today. There's contact lenses, there's vision therapy. Well, I knew what contact lenses were. I said, what's vision therapy? When he told me that you could help people that had visually related learning problems, a turned eye, and things like that, I said, wow, that's what I was supposed to do. Now, I've been out of school for 6 years. I didn't know if I could cut it. So I went to the University of Miami and enrolled for one course, Psych 101. And I aced it. And I said, okay, I know what I'm doing now. I'm going to go back to school and become an optometrist. About that time, I said, I guess I better tell my girlfriend. So I proposed to my girlfriend, and this is what I said. If you can stand about 5 years of hardship, let's get married. So I took my pre-med in Miami at Miami-Dade College, and then we moved to Memphis. We moved while my wife was in her 8th month of pregnancy, because we couldn't travel in a 9th. My son was born right after I started school, and that was the best move I ever made. I became an optometrist, and afterwards I became what we call a neurooptometrist. I specialize in working with traumatic brain injury, crossed eyes, visually related learning problems. I'm board certified by both the College of Optometry and Vision Development and NEURA, which is a Neuro-Optometric Rehabilitation Association, and specializing in these things that we're talking about, even sports vision. So it's got to be a really interesting and exciting career. It gives me great satisfaction. Patients have told us, by us I mean my therapists and myself, that we've actually changed lives. You can't buy that. That's just something that you have a calling for. I have 2 therapists. Kim had been with me for 46 years, and she just retired. She outlasted 3 wives over that time, and she says, well, that's because she didn't have to live with me. So like I said, I went to school in Memphis, and there in Tennessee, they don't actually talk, they sing. So the first week there, I went to get a haircut, and I sat down, and the barber said to me, "Come on, I said, what? And "Come and I said, I mean, that's the way they spoke. I said, yeah, sure, whatever. And then I said, wait a minute, I apologize. I really didn't understand you. Could you say that again slower? And he said, cut it all off. No, he was going to give me a buzz cut. That was really popular back then. Now, I was in line at Disney World one time with my wife, and we got into a discussion with the couple in front of us. They turned out to be from Memphis. I told them the story and said, off. They didn't laugh. They understood every word. Anyway, there was one event that happened in Memphis that I will never forget. On Christmas Day, my wife and I and my son were living in a beautiful, brand new apartment complex. There was about 6 different buildings. There was an Olympic-sized swimming pool. It was great while I was going to school. Anyway, on Christmas Day, there was a murder. This girl had been receiving obscene phone calls, and on Christmas Day, they found her body. Well, that was a little bit unnerving, But the thing was, about 3 weeks later, my wife starts receiving these obscene phone calls. And we're figuring, hey, this could be the same guy. So I called the police, and I got hold of this, I have no other way to say it, this stupid dispatcher. And I explained that I lived in the same building where the Christmas Day murder took place, and now my wife is receiving those obscene phone calls. And her reaction was, well, what do you want us to do about that? We can't do anything. You want us to put a person there all the time? If he comes over to your place, then call us. Whoa. So we were going to get no help there. Well, I said, okay, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. Now, I happen to have a pistol, which was loaded. So I said to my wife, look, you can practically see through our window in the living room because the curtains are sort of diaphanous and you can't see who's there, but you can see that there are people walking around. I said, I'm going to pretend to go to work and I'm going to sneak back in and I'm going to get in the bedroom and have my gun. If he calls, you invite him over. So about 10 or 15 minutes after I left really loudly, hey baby, I'll see you, I'll get back from work. And I walk out one door and I sneak back in the other door. And about 10 minutes later, the phone rings and it's him. And he's threatening my wife that if she doesn't go to bed with him, he's going to tell me that she did. He's also threatening to kill my kid. And she says, and your husband is he said something about your husband, and she got all shook up and she said, well, he's here right now, you can talk to him. And naturally he hung up. And that she blew it because I wanted her to invite him over and I would have trapped that son of a bitch. Anyway, 3 months later, they're still following up on this, and a detective comes, knocks on my door, and says, I'm still investigating that Christmas Day murder, and I was wondering if you could give us any information. And I said, oh yeah, come on in. And I told him the story about the person that had handled my call. He went ballistic. That was the opportunity to catch that guy, and they blew it. So that brings me to the next chapter, the final chapter.